Hi, I'm Jim Hannum and I live in Olympia, Washington. This video presentation about the Ann Arbor Railroad was prepared in the year 2000 using 8mm film that I took in the summer of 1967. During those months I was on summer break, having just completed the first year of medical school at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. I had been exposed to the Ann Arbor Railroad throughout childhood, growing up in Milan, with the tracks running about 600 yards behind the house where my family lived, and with trains clearly visible from my bedroom window. In addition, my father was intrigued by railroads and was a great source of information about the Ann Arbor. In 1967, I worked as a head brakeman on the extra board out of Owosso and also spent 2 weeks working on the switch engine that was based in Ann Arbor. This video contains film from both experiences. The first scene is filmed from an Owosso to Toledo train near Lakeland, Michigan in the late afternoon or early evening. In 1967 there were 2 trains daily in each direction. One was local and did most of the road switching. The other, which we are seeing here, was called Hot Shot. Every day this train left the Alberta boat landing in the morning, departed Owosso in the afternoon, and was designed to set off the last of its cars in Toledo before midnight. The per diem charge for having foreign rail cars on the Ann Arbor line was about $7 per day and was computed at midnight. Therefore, the company made a huge effort to deliver as many cars as possible to other lines before the end of the day. We continue south, passing under the highway bridge that carries US 23 and M14. Now in Ann Arbor, the steeple of St. Thomas Catholic Church is visible on the horizon just before we cross the famous curved bridge over the Huron River and the New York Central tracks. On a different day, the same train, filmed from the switch engine, enters the ferry yard in Ann Arbor and sets off cars bound for local customers and for interchange with the New York Central. Ferry Yard is located to the east of the Michigan football stadium, and before the interstate highway system was built, it was common to see up to 8 or more passenger trains called football specials in the yard on football Saturdays. Trains originating in Detroit came out to Milan on the Wabash Railroad, then proceeded north to Ann Arbor. For an Ohio State game, trains originated in Columbus, came to Toledo on the C&O, and then finished the trip on the Ann Arbor. When Michigan State was the opponent, football specials left East Lansing on the Grand Trunk Western and transferred at Durand to the Ann Arbor for the remainder of the trip down to the game. This is the switch engine that in 1967 was kept permanently in Ann Arbor. The turntable was occasionally used to turn a car end for end if that were required in order to spot it correctly. This structure is the yard office at Ferry Yard. Just north of this building on the east side of the railroad is Ferry Field, where Michigan athletic teams practiced. This caboose was permanently placed in Ann Arbor across the line from the yard office, and the switchmen seen here lived in the caboose during the week, returning to Owosso on weekends. The indulgence of my wife Carol, who took these particular pictures, made it possible for me to hold a job on the railroad. I still have the brass switch key, number A296, which I used that summer. This is the yard in Toledo. The Ann Arbor Railroad was owned by the Detroit, Toledo, and Ironton Railroad in 1967, and some of the trainmen that I talked to were irritated that the DT&I had swapped some older, less powerful DT&I locomotives for the 25 2,500 horsepower units that were owned by the Ann Arbor. Consequently, many Ann Arbor trains were pulled by DT&I locomotives, while the Ann Arbor units were in use in Ohio. Now we are heading north, approaching the Wabash Diamond in Milan. This brick tower controlled train movements around Milan by means of numerous large, hand-operated switches located on the second floor. The site was staffed 24 hours a day by an operator who communicated with other locations by telegraph. The Ann Arbor was the first railroad to be built through Milan. Later, when the Wabash was constructed, a wooden control tower was put up at that location. I learned that this earlier tower was destroyed by a railroad accident in the 1930s. At the same time, an excellent and unneeded brick tower existed on the Wabash line at the village of Britain, where the former line of the Michigan and Ohio Railroad, running from Dundee through Britain and on to Marshall, had been abandoned. This structure is that tower after it was moved to Milan. By 1992, when this more recent video was made, the tower was no longer staffed, and all switching at Milan was controlled by the Norfolk Southern Railroad from a remote location. The old shack appears to be one of the older establishments in Milan. It was rumored that northbound trainmen, waiting for a meet in Milan, would sometimes quench their thirst under the auspices of that venerable facility. This is a good place to mention that although the Ann Arbor Railroad appears on the map to have been oriented more or less in a north-south configuration, the traffic on the line related mostly to freight moving east or west on the railroads with which it intersected. For that reason, trains routed from the boat landing towards Toledo were called eastbound, while the oppositely directed trains were westbound. Bypassing a bottleneck in Chicago was at that time the main competitive advantage of the Ann Arbor. Preparing to depart Milan, headed towards Owosso, the city of Milan's water tower is visible as we look east across Ford Lake. Continuing now to a location about 1 mile north of the Wabash Diamond, we can look east and see the buildings of Milan High School. The train is now climbing the slight incline north of Milan. Archaeologically, Lake Erie extended to this point thousands of years ago, and the grade is located at the ancient shoreline. In the days before diesel engines, a small steam helper engine was kept at Milan and used to boost trains up this slope. Urania is the old station which served Ypsilanti State Hospital. At one time, coal deliveries were made here, but that stopped when the facility switched to natural gas heat. This diamond is located at the location of the mostly abandoned New York Central line from Ypsilanti through Saline to Manchester. This portion of that line now belongs to the current Ann Arbor Railroad and supplies rail service to the Ford plant in Saline. Next, we pass under Interstate 94 south of Ann Arbor. Continuing northbound, DT&I GP7 number 966 passes under the Stadium Bridge as it enters the yard in Ann Arbor. The yard office is seen at the left. These locomotives are from a westbound local freight mid-afternoon in Ann Arbor. The trainmen had cut off their train in the yard and gone downtown for lunch at Leo Ping's Chinese restaurant, a longtime favorite of the crews and located only a few feet from the right-of-way. Now they have returned to the yard and are connecting up for the trip to Owosso. The last scene is at the north side of the city of Ann Arbor at the Leslie Park Golf Course on Traver Road. Because there were just the two trains in each direction on any day, trains frequently were assigned the maximum tonnage that the available locomotives could pull. I recall that westbound trains departing Milan, if powered by two 2,500 horsepower units, were expected to fill their consist up to 5,000 tons and then proceed up the ruling grade. I hope you have enjoyed this brief glimpse of the Ann Arbor Railroad in 1967. Music credits go to the University of Michigan Band under the direction of Dr. William D. Ravelli.